Hello, everyone. This is Jonathan Little. I'm here today with the 101st episode of Weekly Poker Hand. We are officially locked into doing at least 100 more episodes. Hopefully. Today we're playing a hand from a $1,500 buy-in World Series of Poker event, but before I talk to you about that hand, I want to tell you about my free PokerStars home game. It runs at 4 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday, and I give away a lot of prizes. First place in the league is a $100 coupon to my video training products at jonathanlittlepoker.com. So if you want to get some of my video training products completely for free, you have to win them. You have to beat all the players who are playing. Check it out. You can get full details about the home game at jonathanlittlepoker.com/home game. I hope to see you there. I play in it pretty much every week where I am not playing a major tournament. So in this hand, I have Jack 10 offsuit. I want to make it clear, this hand is actually going to display a poor play by my opponent and not necessarily a great play by me. I raised to 400 from the low jack. It's worth noting I've been incredibly tight at this table so far. I've pretty much lost every hand I've played for the last 3 hours. So whenever that's the case, assuming you haven't been too overly crazy, you can get away with opening a few more hands just because ideally people will fold to you if you've been on the tighter side. So I make it 400, and then a tight aggressive player on the button calls. He could have all sorts of hands, suited connectors, big cards, medium pairs, small pairs, etc. So the flop comes Queen, 9, 8, rainbow, giving me the absolute nuts. That's good. So at this point, whenever the board comes a lot of middle cards, it's pretty safe to assume your opponent has something. Notice if he has ace-king, he probably would have re-raised pre-flop. So if he has ace-queen, he has top pair. If he has ace-jack, he has a gut shot. Ace-10, he has a gut shot. Ace-9, ace-8, etc., he has a pair. King-queen, he has a pair. Queen-jack, he has a pair. King-jack, he has a gut shot. King-10, he has a gut shot. As you can see, pretty much every possible holding that he would call with, besides the small pairs, has something on this board. So whenever that's the case, you can usually get away with betting on the bigger side. I think a bet of about 600 or 650 would be ideal in this scenario into the 1,025 pot. I bet 575, which I think is perfectly standard out of my 7,500 stack. And my opponent calls, which is great. The turn is the 6 of diamonds. Again, an effective blank. And as on the flop, I think my opponent's going to have a pretty strong range here. Notice if he has top pair, he's almost certainly not going to fold. If he has a 9 or an 8, usually it's going to be with a hand like 9-8, 8-7, 10-9, something like that, that has a straight draw or open-ended straight draw in addition to the pair. So whenever that's the scenario, you can expect your opponent to call a lot of the time. Also notice that I started the turn with 6,500 chips in my stack, and the pot was 2,200. So if I bet 1,500 and my opponent calls, the pot's now going to be 5,200 going to the river, and I'm going to have about 5,000 remaining in my stack, allowing for a nice pot size all-in on the river. If I bet smaller, which is what I would typically do in this spot, I think a quote-unquote standard bet when super deep would be something like 1,300. If I bet 1,300, in order to go all-in on the river, I would be making a larger than pot size shove. And you're going to find that in general, as your shove on the river starts to become larger than the size of the pot, your opponent will fold more often. So anyway, I bet 1,500. And much to my surprise, my opponent makes it 3,600. So let's think about the hands he should actually make it 3,600 with, assuming they are for value. I mean, I'm kind of having a hard time finding any hands he should raise here for value besides, well, I was going to say sets, but even sets are in pretty great shape. The reason you would consider raising sets, and I guess hands like Queen 9 and 9-8, are because your opponent could easily get a jack, a 10, or a 7 on the river that could beat you. So you wouldn't really see those outs coming. But even then, it's only 3 of the cards that are particularly bad. So if I was in my opponent's shoes, I think I would continue slow playing everything. Doesn't really matter because I have the nuts here. So I go all in and my opponent calls. And I was expecting to see a set or 2 pair. But he turns over King, Queen, offsuit. So this is a spot where I think my opponent made a gigantic blunder. Notice if he did just call, the river would have been a 5. I would have probably went all in just the same, and he would have folded. He would have got off the hook. Even on fairly safe rivers, if I go all in on the river, my opponent should probably fold unless he thinks I'm just absolutely crazy. And this is a very common thing that you see, a very common mistake you see amateur players make. They get a hand like top pair, assume top pair must be the nuts, and then just try to blindly pile their stack into the pot. And if you do this on a regular basis, if you're raising the turn for value with top pair, you are almost certainly making a gigantic blunder. So take that play out of your game, never do it again, and you'll make a lot more money. Of course, a lot of people look at this and say, well, your opponent could have gotten outdrawn on the river. Like you said, there are a lot of scary cards. That's true, but the problem is that when he raises and gets all in, as he did here, he's going to be drawing either completely dead or nearly dead against a hand like Queen 9 or a set. I guess he's completely dead against a set as well. So do not take top pair and turn it into an effective bluff. That is a horrible play that you will see a lot of players, particularly in the small stakes games, make on a regular basis. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Weekly Poker Hand. Be sure to check back next week for another episode. And also be sure to play in my free PokerStars home game. You can check that out at jonathanlittlepoker.com/home game. Hope to see you there. And hopefully you get lucky and bust me. I'll talk to you next week.